It's December. Everybody has 4 games left. Things are starting to shake out. Things are starting to get real interesting in this very, very tight season of the NFL. Everybody's within a game of each other. We're going to break a lot of that stuff down. Plus, we got to talk about Rams Cardinals, Monday Night Football. Rams take out the Cardinals. We'll talk about that and get you ready for your playoff pushes in fantasy. So do not miss the Tuesday Fantasy Forum today on the Locked On NFL podcast.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, football fans? Welcome into another episode of Locked On NFL, your daily podcast covering everything around the National Football League. Thanks as always for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day, every day. Don't forget we're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. Wave Luke. Hi, everybody. Hello. Good to see you. It is Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nolan, one of your Tuesday hosts here with you every week, joined as always by Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL, your daily host over at Locked On Vikings. We are going to break down a ton centering around, to start off with our focus here, the big stories around the NFL, including, of course, the NFL playoff pictures in both conferences, because they're all tight, Luke. That's what I'm learning. Every playoff race is tight.
Everything is tight. Everybody's within, I mean, in the AFC, the 5th seeded Chargers are a game out of first place in the conference.
Yeah.
And play on Thursday night. Like, they could be vying for first place in the conference in 4 days, and right now they're the 5th seed.
Yeah.
And it's the same way in the NFC, and it's the same way with those final wild card spots. All are, 1 or 2 spots between like 8 teams that all technically could get it if things break one way or another. So I think, last few games of the season, we're going to kind of find out who the men are, who the boys are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're through bye weeks now. We get Saturday football starting up this weekend for the next 2 weeks. Oh, gotta love it. So let's start off with the AFC here. I mean, the teams at the top of the AFC are all tied up at 9-4, seeds 1, 2, and 3. The New England Patriots sitting at the top, Tennessee Titans at 2, and then the Kansas City Chiefs at 3. Titans hold a head-to-head win over the Kansas City Chiefs. That's why they're above them. And then, of course, the New England Patriots above both when it comes to percentage of win within the conference games. And so here we are again, New England Patriots on top of the AFC, but it's not all said and done.
No, it's interesting. I feel like the trajectory of these teams with the Patriots and Chiefs, they both had similar trajectories where they kind of had some troubles early out. They've kind of figured out their deal and now they're hot. And the Titans have been a little bit more sporadic and a bit more of a week-to-week proposition, but more plus weeks than minus weeks, obviously. They're 9-4. So it kind of comes down to, like, who do you actually trust in these 3 teams? For me, I think that's the Patriots, as boring as it is to say, trust the Belichick team and the team that's the front runner right now. I don't know. Does this come down to tiebreakers at the end, or do the Patriots, as the, I think, most consistent team at this point, and with the rookie struggles of Mac Jones and stuff well behind them, I don't know. Can they run away with this?
Yeah, I think that when we see these teams all tied up at the top, we immediately start to dig into tiebreakers. But there's a world in which over the course of these last 4 games, somebody falls off and somebody else wins the games that they need to win. And therefore, you end up just simply with the better record. So it's not always going to come down. Yeah, exactly. And then if we look at the rest of it here, we have the Baltimore Ravens at the 4th seed at 8-5, the Los Angeles Chargers at 8-5 as well with the 5th seed. No tiebreaker there, as Baltimore Ravens are division winners at the moment. So that one, really, you look at those two, and like you mentioned, all the way down to 5th seed in the AFC, you're 1 game away from first place.
Yeah, and everybody is in this. I mean, save like Houston and Jacksonville, whose seasons were lost long ago. Everybody had, even Miami, who we were talking about writing them off on this very show like a month ago. And suddenly they've surged. They're 6-7. They're a game out of the playoffs.
Yeah. And that's the wild part, is that at 6-7, they're right there on the cusp, because 7-6 right now, you've got 5 teams all tied up that stretch from 6th place with the Indianapolis Colts all the way down to 10th place with the Denver Broncos. And you've got Pittsburgh just outside of that at 6-1, only a half game behind. And so it continues to be tight at the bottom, just like it is up at the top.
Right. And it's going to come down to, I mean, everybody's got messy schedules, right? Everybody's got a hard team or two. Everybody's got an easy team or two. Who can step up and win out? Right? There are 7 teams all vying for 2 playoff spots, right? Just by a factor of necessity, right? A factor of somebody's got to win all the games. Somebody's going to win out.
Right.
And whoever wins out is suddenly sitting there at 10-7 or even 11-6 and being that red hot team headed into the playoffs. And then you compare that to like who is going to be on a 4-game win streak in the 3 seed, meeting up with whatever of those 3 teams at the top, and the Patriots, Titans, and Chiefs did the worst. And you're going to have a weird momentum battle.
Yeah, absolutely. And we could see the same thing, just like we mentioned over in the AFC, over in the NFC. But before we jump to that, as you mentioned, the Texans, Jacksonville, they're out. New York Jets also out after they lost to New Orleans Saints this past weekend. So now over at the top of the NFC, we've got 3 teams tied there as well. Top there, 10-3. You've got the Green Bay Packers, who just raised up to number 1 in the NFC because the Arizona Cardinals fall to 3rd place after their loss to the Los Angeles Rams on Monday Night Football. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers holding the number 2 spot. They have a strength of victory win right now over the Arizona Cardinals. So that's a tiebreaker there. And then you have with the Green Bay Packers win percentage in the conference that puts them up above both Tampa and Arizona at the top of the conference.
Yeah, and I guess with the Packers, too, we're going to learn a little something about them, too. They've got Ravens, Browns, Vikings. Those are 3 teams with their backs likely against the wall that are really scraping and clawing through this season. The Ravens with either a hobbled Lamar Jackson, no Lamar Jackson. The Browns are going to be fighting for their lives. The Vikings are going to be fighting for their lives. And they wrap out the season with the Lions. But I think those 3 games, if the Packers can keep their winning ways on those 3 games, they get the 1 seed and they deserve it.
Yeah, absolutely. Los Angeles, who just won this game right now at 9-4 after winning on Monday Night Football. So they're tied with Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys, though, at the top of the NFC East. So they hold the 4 seed while Los Angeles is at the 5 seed. But as we mentioned with the AFC, only 1 game out of first place all the way down to 5. Mm-hmm. And you also have at the 6 seed right now, the other NFC West team, the San Francisco 49ers, who had 7-6. So you've got 3 NFC West teams. And I believe this is one of the divisions that we talked about before the season began, that it felt very likely that they could carry 3 playoff teams this year.
Yeah, and don't count out Seattle with 5 wins, right? It's going to get weird. I like the futures of the San Francisco 49ers, honestly. They seem like they have figured out who they want to be and how they want to attack teams. And sometimes it takes a little bit to figure out who you are. But this Deebo Samuel being a running back kind of thing, or running from like H-back alignments and stuff, and the way that Kyle Shanahan has he's sort of found the team's stride, I guess. And so I don't know. Don't count them out for rising up even further in the standings potentially. As hot as the Rams are. The Rams you can pencil in, though. They would need to lose out before they're even sweating tiebreakers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the bottom of the NFC here, it's all 6 and 7, right? You've got 5 teams that are tied from 7th seed all the way down to the 11th seed, and with the series of tiebreakers and head-to-head, this, that, and the others, you've got the Washington football team right at the top of that, holding on to that 7th seed, but the Minnesota Vikings, Philadelphia Eagles, Atlanta Falcons, and New Orleans Saints not out of the conversation, and neither are, as you mentioned, the 5 and 8 teams, the Carolina Panthers, who maybe are, honestly, but then the Seattle Seahawks, who could still find their way to surge into this.
Yeah. And of all of those teams, who figured out who they are, right?
Right.
And that's why I like the futures of the 49ers. They know who they are. They're going to have to play on the road in the playoffs, but they know who they are and they're going to go attack that, right? But who of those teams, the Vikings, Washington, Philadelphia, whoever, your Saints, like, who can figure out who they are and rattle off some wins here and go into the postseason with an identity and with a winning streak? Somebody is going to go in on a winning streak. It's the same thing as the AFC. Mathematically, they just have to, because you have to have a winning streak to separate yourself from this giant glut. And whoever that is going to be the hot team you don't want to play. And I can't wait.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a lot of fun watching the way that this completely or continues to unfold. Washington football team's going to end all 4 of their final games with divisional matchups, and then you have maybe 4 of the most volatile NFC teams sitting at the bottom of the division.
It's going to be very cursed. I would not want to be the 2 or 3 seed and have to deal with some like weird cursed ass Vikings team
coming through half out of nowhere. And then of course the only team eliminated. Yeah, right. And of course the only team eliminated over the NFC, the Detroit Lions.
Relegate. Who would lose to them? Couldn't imagine. But look, We got y'all set up here, right? Now you got your sense, your landscape of the league, right? You got an inside track, the power that comes along with that. That's what you listen to a podcast like this for. You switch to Boost Mobile for the power of saving money, because with Boost, you get the power of a free 5G phone, so you can listen to the latest episodes of all your favorite Locked On shows and keep up with your favorite players and teams. The power of 3 unlimited data lines for $30 a month per line, so your family can share all the insights, and the power of one of America's largest 5G networks, so you can do it all at the speed of 5G. With all that money you save and all that edge you'll gain, just how powerful will you become? Switch to Boost Mobile to find out. Get a free Samsung Galaxy A32 5G when you switch to one of America's largest 5G networks. More power to save. Boost Mobile. Free phone limited to new customers and 1 per line. Additional restrictions apply. Offers and coverage are not available everywhere or for all phones and networks. See boostmobile.com for details. We are drawing nearer and nearer and nearer to Super Bowl 56 at SoFi. It's less than 100 days away, and On Location, the official hospitality partner of the NFL, is the only place to score a once-in-a-lifetime Super Bowl ticket and experience package. Select your exact seats and choose from elite experiences featuring an exclusive pregame celebration with NFL legends, 5-star LA hotels, and food by the great Wolfgang Puck. Visit onlocationexp.com/SB56 for more information or search Super Bowl On Location. That's onlocationexp.com/SB56 or just search Super Bowl On Location.
All right, everybody, continuing on with this episode of Locked On NFL. Thanks as always for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day. It's Tuesday episode, so you've got Luke Braun, your daily host and expert over at the Locked On Vikings podcast. Myself, Ross Jackson, over at the Locked On Saints podcast. Luke didn't like me calling him the expert in pain over there.
We're very well versed. We know what it's like to hurt.
Yeah. Sorry, buddy. I want to help you, but
apologize on behalf of your team.
Yeah. I'm not helping, I'm sure. But hey, two teams that didn't really help each other out over the course of the entire season so far have been these NFC West teams that have really, as we mentioned, put themselves into a position where they're all within a game of each other, fighting for these playoff spots. And tonight on Monday Night Football, we got the big matchup between the Los Angeles Rams up against the Arizona Cardinals. Los Angeles Rams walk away victors in this one, 30-23. If you were to look at this game and say that it was won in one space, or if it was won or lost in one space, what would you look at? Where would you point to in this matchup?
Yeah, it's pass rush, right? Pass rush and pass pro. Because the Rams won on both sides of the ball there. They had a lot of trouble. The Cardinals had a lot of trouble getting to Matt Stafford and getting pressure on him, and it allowed a lot of the concepts, the longer developing cross country, deep post stuff that take a while to develop, could develop. And then on the other side, Kyler Murray was running around for his life a lot, including down to that final possession. So if you missed this game, it came down to the 2-score thing. Cardinals kick a field goal, onside kick, get the onside kick, and they have 37 seconds to score a touchdown. And then they go holding penalty, and then there's a false start and a sack. And it was kind of all Aaron Donald just dominating a guy and it turned into penalties instead of plays, or sometimes sacks or whatever. But it was Aaron Donald beating the crap out of people. And, Leonard Floyd getting an interception. There were some weird flukes of luck and tipped balls and stuff like that Kyler Murray threw a couple of pretty rough interceptions. But ultimately, it all kind of stemmed from the big boys up front on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. That's really where you saw this game won or lost in the Arizona Cardinals sense. The Arizona Cardinals also had some really unique things. They were not unique, but kind of interesting things that they were doing on defense. They really leaned into sort of this cover 2-man or cover or 2-man under defense, which invited the run a lot, but they also they weren't really able to limit the passing game in this one. Matt Stafford, 23 of 30 for over 270 yards, 76.7 completion percentage. If you're going to dare a team to run, you have to also be able to stop the pass. Otherwise, you're going to end up getting carved up. And that's what you saw here. Sean McVay, lots of good play calls to attack that man defense.
Yeah. When you commit to defending the pass and you still can't defend the pass, that is a really, really difficult place as a defensive coordinator. You cannot commit any more resources. And you just have to start playing better. But if they're going to man up on, Cooper Kupp and Odell Beckham, you got to have the horses to do that. And I don't know if that was the right plan for the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals, with the speed they have on defense, and that's why they feel better going too high, because if it is a run play, they got Isaiah Simmons is fast as hell. He can come right back in. If he's going to deepen, he can cover that space quicker, so they can space out a little bit more. So the way the Cardinals like to play is a spaced out defense. But just trying to like stay tight and hip to hip and stuff, it's not their game, and it is the Rams' game.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you saw the physicality from the wide receivers, the physicality from the offensive line in this one. Andrew Whitworth, I believe, becoming the oldest player to ever start a game at left tackle in this one. And we also saw AJ Green go over 10,000 receiving yards, which is the 50th all-time player to ever do that, 5th active player to have that, to sort of be in that class at the moment. But, you know, you saw the Arizona Cardinals coming into this one, the defense struggling, according to Football Outsiders, in terms of DVOA at the other receivers. So not wide receiver 1, not wide receiver 2, which I think is probably a subjective situation in terms of who you consider, you know, 1 or 2. But you would imagine that Cooper Kupp, Odell Beckham Jr. in this would be 1 and 2. Yeah, Van Jefferson,
like the probably, rotational guys, yeah,
all falling under that other receiver category. And Van Jefferson went deep over the top on a busted coverage. You saw him sort of get physical with a cornerback, Alford, down the field, and Alford ended up kind of falling into trail technique there, but no safety over the top, didn't get enough depth, and then just an easy pitch and catch from Matt Stafford to Van Jefferson in that one to be able to help to blow this game open a little bit.
Yeah, and some of those coverages can get really fragile. And especially with trail technique, which is very high in my mind because the Vikings gave up a 2-point conversion on kind of a similar mistake in their game against the Steelers on Thursday night. It was like trail technique is something you do on purpose where you lag behind the receiver and you're actually not running at 100% speed. And you're kind of trying to bait the quarter. You're trying to make him look open. And usually you'll do that in a situation where there's somebody elsewhere in the coverage who's going to poach that route, who's going to try to jump the route or try to get an interception, make a play on the ball. You kind of want to make it look like there's a little bit of space. And then you turn on the jets, you start running 100%, and that space closes faster than the quarterback thought it would. And that's how you can try to like force interceptions. But then if the guy isn't there, like in this case, if the safety doesn't drop back enough and he's not there, then all you've done is put yourself, 3 steps behind and the quarterback can just lead the dude. And so trail technique is this sort of risk reward thing that's built into coverages. It's not like a decision corners are making. It's like part of the greater machine.
Right.
But it is something that can really get punished if you're not on your P's and Q's about it. And those little details, McVay is very good at finding those holes and punishing those little details. And Matt Stafford's been around long enough and he has the arm talent to make you suffer for those.
Yeah. And Matt Stafford, his first career win, his 18th game, first career win, 0-17 coming into this one up against a team that has 5 games over 500, 1-17 on his career now.
Yep. Rip Lions.
Yes, of course, he played all of the 17 losses with the Lions and then ends up getting the win with the Los Angeles Rams. The other thing I want to quickly discuss in this one too, down 30-20, you get to the point where you've got a 56-yard field goal on 4th down 10 points, still have some time on the clock here. The Cliff Kingsbury, no hesitation in this one. The Arizona Cardinals go for it on 4th down. They aren't able to convert and extend the drive. Would it have been wiser to kick the field goal there? Or are there too many factors involved?
I got to know what they talked about with 56 yards because that would have been a 56-yard kick. And a lot of times kickers will warm up on the field and they'll figure out the wind and they'll figure out how the grass is treating them and they'll figure out just how they're feeling today and stuff. And then they'll usually go to the coach and say, this is my distance today. This is what I think my distance is. So if Prater says, it's a 55-yard day, then that could influence Cliff Kingsbury to say, all right, we're kind of in no man's land. We got to go for it. I don't know if that even considering that it's the right decision. I mean, we've seen Cliff Kingsbury take a 62-yarder in the past, and Prater hit that in week 2 against my Vikings. Existence is pain. But so I don't know if maybe there was something that Prater said or something like that, or Cliff Kingsbury just wanted to get the touchdown and not the field goal. You needed a touchdown and a field goal anyways, but it did end up kind of compounding and snowballing into a much worse situation. But even with that, you got the ball with 37 seconds. Maybe don't melt down. And this Cardinals team hasn't been in the postseason yet under, Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray. This like iteration of the Cardinals hasn't been in these big moments. And when you do get into the postseason, a game like this can help you out because you go, okay, let's say you're in wild card weekend and you've got a do or die drive with 40 seconds to go. And you go, remember that one time it was Monday Night Football and we blew it? Let's not do that again. And having been there once and messed it up once, you can learn from that experience. It might help them in the long run, but obviously you still gotta stave off the Rams for the division. It's now only a 1-game lead there, and you gotta get to it first.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I don't think that there's any reason here to start counting out the Arizona Cardinals, but it will be interesting to see how this game impacts them as they move forward throughout the rest of the season and try to close it out up at the top of at least the NFC West. But again, they could potentially still end up at the top of the NFC. We'll see how the rest of the division, the division as well as the conference, ends up closing out these final 4 games.
Yeah, it's a cozy positioning for the Rams. They're going to make the playoffs. And you know what else is cozy? My feet, because of my Stance socks. Stance is great because they wanted to reinvent socks, underwear, and active apparel. They focus on comfort. They form fit your feet. They have like left and right. They have designed socks to be more than just an afterthought, but to be something that's actually nice. And they have all sorts of fun designs for style and self-expression, because ultimately, what are your clothes but a way to express yourself? Everything should be a direct extension of who you are, and you can show off a little bit of that personality with Stance. Stance believes that the perfect fit matters more than fitting in. If you feel good, you do good. Go see for yourself. Register for an account at stance.com and get 15% off of your first purchase. You can use promo code LOCKEDON, all one word, LOCKEDON, at checkout to apply. Enjoy the color and comfort of a life less ordinary with Stance.
All right, everybody, we are wrapping up today's episode of Locked On NFL with our Tuesday Fantasy Forum, joined by the one, the only Marcus Mosher at Marcus_Mosher on Twitter, Locked On Cowboys, Locked On Dynasty Football. Marcus, it is that time, fantasy football playoffs. What general advice do you have for teams that are getting into those fantasy football playoff matchups?
Yeah, so there's that old phrase, dance with the one that brought you. I'm sure you guys are both familiar with that, right? That doesn't apply to fantasy football because we're trying to win. We don't care about where you drafted these guys or what you had to trade to go get them. You just want to set the best possible lineup here in Week 15. So don't be attached to the ADP and the cost. Just set the guys that are going to score you the most points. For example, I have Ezekiel Elliott in a couple leagues. Mm-hmm. I'm going to play Rashad Penny over him this week because Penny just has a chance to have a higher scoring week than Ezekiel Elliott. It's just where we're at in this point in the season. Doesn't mean Zeke's a lesser player. It's just the way the fantasy season has played out. I think that's
that makes sense.
Yeah,
it makes sense. You have to play the best running back on a team instead of the second best running back on a team.
Luke, I love you. You're great.
He says with hate and fury in his eyes.
You're right.
He's going to find me later.
Sure. No, you're right. Luckily, we're not on the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Otherwise, this would be just a fire take. So you're good.
Yeah, this is the safe place to make such a take. You're going to be fine here.
I'm just here to cause problems. Okay, so in all seriousness, with that in mind, of get somebody who wins the league. Who is out there right now? Because we just had a crazy COVID outbreak in the NFL, 37 positive tests. Some of them, like Alexander Mattison, might affect our teams. Who could possibly be out there if it's A, an emergency situation, or B, you're the 6th seed trying to go toe-to-toe with a team that scored more over the league over the season? Who can we find out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be slim pickings at this time of year, right? There's just not a lot of guys available. If anybody's playing, they're usually on a roster. But I mean, let's talk about some of these guys. What about your fourth round rookie running back? You could pronounce his name better than I can.
Wangu.
Kenny Wangu.
Don't think he's. So it's hard because they just claimed Wayne Gallman off of waivers. So it's one of those two would be the backup,
week, right?
I don't know. I don't know how comfortable he is with the particular system stuff that the Vikings do because I'm not that familiar with him because they just picked him up like 2 hours ago. But with Wangu, if he is comfortable, Gallman will play over Wangu. Wangu is not really ready to play running back from scrimmage all that much, and you kind of saw it. If you started him when he played against, I want to say it was Detroit, you kind of got owned. And I think the Vikings probably would avoid that if they can. But if return yards count or something like that, like that's always a thing. Or, Minnesota DST.
I'll give you another one. Corey Clement in Dallas. Tony Pollard probably unlikely to play here in Week 15 against the Giants. He saw 13 carries in a game against Washington. I kind of have a feeling he's going to do the same this week against the Giants. That's not a bad option. If you're looking for a receiver, what about someone like Adam Humphries? Terry McLaurin left last week with a concussion. Humphreys is kind of somebody who gets a lot of targets. Now, his ceiling's not necessarily the highest, but against Philadelphia, maybe you're looking at double-digit targets and maybe 12, 13 PPR points. Those are just two deep, deep names that you could keep an eye on.
What do you do in a situation to where you're getting into the playoffs and you've had Lamar Jackson on your roster, and Lamar Jackson may be unable to go this coming week? We'll see what happens. It sounds like, according to Coach Harbaugh in Baltimore, that it's not a high ankle sprain, so that's good news. Anybody that has been following the New Orleans Saints for any amount of time here over the recent past understands what high ankle sprains can bring you. But if you're maybe one of those fantasy owners, is there maybe, I don't know if there's a quarterback that you can go out and get, but what quarterbacks are you hoping are on your bench that you might be able to utilize in this situation?
I actually think if you're the Lamar Jackson owner, you probably don't want him to play this week, right? Because having a 50% Lamar doesn't do anything, doesn't do you any good. You'd rather have him be out and just make your options a lot clearer, whether you have an established backup. Like maybe you drafted Kirk Cousins in a later round and he's playing, okay. I would go pick up Tyler Huntley right now, because Tyler Huntley, in the 2 games that he's played this year, he's eclipsed 40 yards rushing in each game. He had 270 passing yards against Cleveland. I think he's probably going to start against Green Bay, and it's probably a lock to get 300 total yards and a couple touchdowns. So I think Huntley is the guy you want to pick up this week.
There's something to, I always think from the perspective of like underdog or favorite, depending on what you're going into the matchup as. So correct me if I'm wrong here, but if you're the underdog, maybe you want to take some riskier strategies and try to go a little bit more like high ceiling. And if the bottom falls out, the bottom falls out. But playing it safe isn't going to get you the upset. So with that in mind, are there any like touchdown vultures out there that if you just need to throw a Hail Mary out, I think of like the Adrian Petersons of the world, or somebody like that,
Yeah, that's a good call. So there's guys like we just talked about, like Adam Humphreys. Is he going to win you your game for you? No, probably not. And if you're an underdog, getting 13 points from a flex probably isn't going to do you enough. But having somebody like Donovan Peoples-Jones, who has maybe not been a starter for you all season long, is somebody you want to insert instead, because he's just got the potential to make big plays down the field, especially against this Raiders secondary here in week 15. So I would be more comfortable, starting somebody like Donovan Peoples-Jones, hoping he has a big game, rather than my relatively safe guys that are going to get me 5 for 50 and possibly a touchdown.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? You end up trying to go for the guys that could be the home run hitters that can maybe pile on some points out of nowhere, as opposed to maybe somebody that's going to be kind of, where that it's going to be a higher floor, but the ceiling isn't going to be as high, right?
Correct. And you guys know the names, right? It's the same players every week, like Cole Beasley, Jamison Crowder, Russell Gage. I would rather start somebody with a much higher ceiling, like a Donovan Peoples-Jones or like a Chase Claypool, over those type of guys in a playoff setting.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
The old Deshaun Jackson flex, a tale as old as time.
Hey, that's not a bad name, right? Why not Deshaun Jackson this week for the Raiders? That's a good call.
Yeah, been that way since, I don't know, the 80s? I don't know how long he's been in the league. Marcus, thank you so much for coming and helping us out. And good luck to everybody in their playoffs. And hopefully you're coming back next week with another game to win, yeah?
Thanks, fellas. The
power ranking shows are getting so much more fun as the season starts to wrap out, and as everything is such a glut, and every team is on top of each other. The power rankings become really, really fun and probably way crazier. Yeah. So check that out. Tony and James are going to do the power ranking show tomorrow, as they always do on Wednesdays on the Locked On NFL podcast. We will see you then. In the meantime, check out the Locked On Bets podcast. Your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. We'll see you all then, here on the Locked On NFL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.